Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with an old friend of most of us. When you saw this gentleman at Southampton Airport, you knew you were nearly home. My guest, of course, is Mr. Maurice Wyatt. Maurice, good to see you. And you're
Hi,
looking
good
very
morning,
well.
Tony. Oh, thank you very much for an old one. Yes, so thank you for inviting me on.
Well, I mean, we sort of look at a half century as far as you're concerned, because 50 years ago, I think you said that you sent the acceptance letter to Aurigny saying you wanted to join them.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, Mick McCormick, who was at the Southampton at that point and started up Aurigny's operation, offered me the job in the February, early March, and I decided to take it. I was at the time a lowly air traffic assistant at Southampton Airport, employed by Nat Summers, who was not the biggest of payers in the world. And anyway, Mick said he offered me this job, which initially was only a seasonal job for the summer. But he said he was pretty certain he'd be heading back to Aurigny quite soon, probably May time. And if he did, then it would be a permanent job. So I decided to take a chance. I'd only just turned 20, so not a lot to lose.
Yeah, but I mean, in life, you have to do that sometimes, don't you? You have to sort of say to yourself, well, let's give it a shot. I know I certainly did with our business when we started it up in 1970. I was prepared to do a milk round or something like that in the morning and the financial services in the afternoon. Fortunately,
Yeah.
Christine kept us afloat, and we're very lucky. It took off very well.
Yeah.
Can we have a chat about Sir Derek Bailey, Maurice? Because I mean, he was the founder of it. It got a lot of aviation experience, hadn't he?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, he was a lot of flying background. He was a flyer in World War II. I can't remember his exact sort of, who he flew with, and also his first wife was a renowned aviator as well. So there was a lot of history of aviation in their family. And when he started up Aurigny in 1968, he was collaborating with Britain Norman on the Isle of Wight and looking for an aircraft that would do island hopping, because British United Island Airways had just finished in 1968 operating Guernsey to Alderney, and I believe Guernsey to Jersey as well. And Sir Derek he was going to take over those routes, wanted the aircraft to do it with. Britain Norman came up with the Islander, little 8-seater job. And he's bought those and started that route. And then obviously in 1970, expanded into the Aurigny Southampton route as well, when BUIA, as was, packed that up as well. And at that time, they'd operated from Gatwick to Aurigny. And Southampton was a summer route. When Sir Derek started up, obviously with the Islander, he thought, well, Gatwick was really not a starter, too far away.
Yeah.
And Southampton would be the ideal spot, and it had the main railway line connection to London. So a good, that was how that started. But he had the foresight and the vision to start off a basic island hopping air service.
And he was resident here, wasn't he? He lived on Aurigny.
Yes, he did. Initially, when I started in 1970, he was still based in Gloucestershire, near Staverton Airport. I believe he was Brinsop Farms was his business up there, one of the businesses. And he had Glossair, which was an aero engineering firm. And when he started the island routes with the Islander, there was a Glossair base at Bournemouth Airport where Aurigny used to have their servicing done.
Right.
And that continued for quite a few years anyway. And I think Sir Derek, I can't remember, to be honest, he used to fly in and out of Southampton down to us from Staverton on a regular basis, and talking with Britain Norman and the sort of ongoing development of the Islander into the Trilander. And then I think he moved to Alderney. I suppose it must have been about maybe 74, 75, something like that, 73. It was the early 70s, but initially he was still in the UK at Gloucestershire.
And it's interesting because Aurigny, you know, in its various forms, still going, is probably one of the longest surviving airlines ever, apart from BA.
Yeah.
You know, it's incredible.
Yeah, well, and still under the same name.
Yes, I mean, that's right.
Yeah, I mean BA, yes, but it was BEA, BOAC.
Yeah, Imperial Airways.
Imperial, just slightly before my time, but only just.
You sure?
Yeah.
But as far as he was concerned,
I mean,
I was going to say,
sorry.
Southampton was a natural place to actually go into, wasn't it?
Yes,
and I still rate it compared with going to Gatwick because, you know, getting in and out of the actual airport terminal buildings and all the rest of it at Gatwick are an absolute nightmare. Yeah. You can go through Southampton in minutes and get on a train in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I reckon, Maurice, if you sort of, you know, if we were in a normal situation now, I bet I could get to central London going Aurigny, Southampton, and then hopping on the train than anyone going from Guernsey to Gatwick. Yeah, because you've got so many other bits and pieces in the way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, right from the word go, when Nat Summers developed the airport in the middle '60s with putting in a hard runway and everything, and one of the stipulations then was that, British Rail were going to provide a station on the airport at that time. Yeah. And it had to happen. It was just such a good connection, as you say. And avoiding all.
Yeah.
And avoiding all the London airports.
Absolutely. And this gentleman actually owned the whole shebang, did he?
Yes, he did. Yeah. He was a businessman who bought it off of Southampton City Council.
Right.
Back in about 1960, 61. The council had taken over the old airfield as was with the grass runway. It was originally owned by the Ministry of Aviation. And Southampton Council took it off when the Ministry of Aviation pulled out. And of course, they didn't really know what to do with it. They knew if it had to be an airport, it needed a hard runway. And they weren't prepared to put taxpayer or council payers' money into it. So they sold it to Nat Summers for a small fee of £250,000, I believe.
Which was a lot of money in those days, wasn't it?
Yeah, fair bit. But he was a good businessman. He could see what was potential was. And mid '60s, he got Costains to build the runway, and then all the traffic that had originally gone to Bournemouth because they couldn't use a grass airfield anymore. They all came back from Bournemouth and started from Southampton because obviously, geographically, Southampton was always the better airport connection-wise.
Yeah. Because the trouble with Bournemouth is it's stuck out in the middle of nowhere, isn't it?
Well, it is, yes. I mean, it's very difficult to get to. It's done very well in past years, I suppose, with holiday flights, which people are more prepared to drive down there to go to. But when it came to the more business day-to-day traffic, in and out, wanted quick connections, then it couldn't hold a candle to Southampton. Southampton was always going to win on that one.
So the first planes at Aurigny operated through to Southampton were Islanders. When did the Trilander appear?
The Trilander first appeared, I think, it was September, October 1971. When I started in April, Aurigny's fleet was 5 or 6 Islanders, and the Trilander was being developed and we were due to take delivery of the first one in the autumn of '71, and that turned up. And we then went on to I don't know how many we bought initially, but probably about 6 or 7 of the original Trilanders through a period of time. And of course, they had a big impact because you were talking, maximum 16 passengers as opposed to 8 on the Islander.
Doubling up.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. And you still had the concession of single pilot and everything else.
Yes, that was a huge bonus, really. Yeah. Sorry.
it was an interesting situation, you know, in terms of that. Now, apart from yourself to Southampton, Mick McCormick obviously returns to Alderney, presumably, after
Yes,
he did his trial run. I recall there were lots of Steves there when we started coming in the early 80s.
yes, there were. Yeah. I mean, we started off when I started in April. Mick McCormick went back to Alderney in May.
Yeah.
The other chap who was working with him at the time, a guy called Paul, he then decided that he was going to move down to Aurigny and work in a hotel down there in the July. So there was me, just became a permanent member. We took on Steve Bailey as my second in command, and one other person for a summer temp who, for the life of me, his name escapes me. But yeah, so they were there. And over the period of time, yes, at one point we had 3 Steves out of 4 staff. But it was always quite an easy way to pass the buck on something.
What Steve said, it was all right.
Steve said it was all right. And they said, well, which one? And he said, oh, I can't remember now.
And you didn't actually have them numbered or anything like that. I remember Steve Bailey very well.
Steve Bailey was the bigger guy. So we had Big Steve and Little Steve.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what we called Steve Mercer. It was probably something rude.
Little Steve went on to get involved with his own jet business.
Yes,
is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he started up a business eventually with a company called Exclusive Jets.
Yeah.
Which is still based at Southampton, out of Signatures building. Yeah, he did very well. Steve Mercer moved up north, and Steve Bailey obviously went to the Channel Islands, to Guernsey, and I believe he lives in Jersey now.
Yeah. Now, pilots, a lot of them were ex-RAF, weren't they?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. I mean, yeah, my first sort of impressions were that most of the early pilots when I started were ex-RAF from World War II times.
Yeah.
And I suppose at that point, a lot of them were heading towards 50 years or so old, still young, but a lot of them had flown bigger aircraft elsewhere in between, but were now quite happy and quite interested to have a single crew operation like that. And, you know, a job where basically, you know, you'd be home every night, barring weather.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something we come to a little bit later on. But was there a guy there called Bert somebody? Do you recall?
Bert Lane.
Yeah. Well, apparently, rumour has it that he took off on one occasion and his wife was sitting behind him. And he sort of veered right and headed towards Guernsey. She tapped him on the shoulder and she said, "Bert, you're supposed to be going to Southampton."
It could quite be. I mean, a lot of these things are apocryphal, aren't they, really? But it did happen. And I remember, yes, another occasion, there was somebody, they'd been going Guernsey, Jersey all morning. And the last flight was Guernsey to Aurigny. And as you say, and then he was so used to going to Jersey, he just started heading off to Jersey. And the same thing, you know, it sounds awful now, he wouldn't get away with it.
No, but you know,
it'd all be headline news.
Yes. Pilot loses way, chooses wrong island. Stuff like that.
You can hear it all, can't you?
Absolutely. Now, looking at the actual way in which the admin at Aurigny ran, the head office essentially was here, wasn't it, on Alderney?
Yeah, it was. Initially, when I first started, operations were in Alderney. Reservations actually were in Jersey still at that point, but that was only for about a year or so. And then reservations moved to Alderney, and that was our HQ then, and everything ran from there.
And looking at reservations, they were on record cards.
Oh, indeed. It was all pencil and paper. Yeah. I mean, you sit back now and you think, how did everybody manage with no internet, no mobiles, no computers? Everything was paper and pencil, and all your communication was just landline telephones.
Yeah.
Which was all right until something dredged up the phone line to the Channel Islands, and then you couldn't talk.
That snookered you for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it ran okay, didn't it? I mean, you had people like John Cadaray were involved, and
yeah. John
Mick was the commercial manager.
Yeah, he after he did his stint in Aurigny, he then moved to Guernsey and he became commercial manager.
Yeah.
John Cad remained ops director. The first MD when I started was John Posnicker,
and
then various others after that.
And of course, Dave Posnicker, he's John's son, eventually gets involved with it, doesn't he? So it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Now we've mentioned the fact that the Southampton airport was in private ownership at that time. Of course, would you describe it as the home of the Spitfire? Because we see that Spitfire as we enter the road leading to the terminal building.
Oh yeah, undoubtedly. The airport is, synonymous with the Spitfire, and there's still the old footage of the very first one taking off from the old airfield in 1936, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, every possible occasion when there was some celebration or air show going on, the Spitfire would always do a fly past over Southampton regardless. Fabulous plane to watch.
Yeah, very much so.
And you could always tell it. I remember one of our pilots, I think it was Sally Barber, whose father flew Spitfires. I mean, she used to be cock a hoop if she got out of the aircraft one day and she just said to everybody, she said, stop. She said, the Spitfire is going to do a fly past. we all had to stand there and watch it.
Now, of course, the terminal building was quite grim, really, wasn't it? I remember vividly Gate 2.
Oh, well, I suppose you've got to remember the actual airport was just a hodgepodge of World War One hangars.
Yeah, right.
The roofing was interesting. When Nat sort of developed the airport, he had these sort of false ceilings put in with the flimsy tiles. And of course, everybody used to look at them in the winter because where the rain was leaking through the roof, you'd see one of these flimsy tiles sort of dipping down with water. And you just hope there wasn't one over the top of your check-in sort of to give somebody a drenching halfway through. But it was an interesting building. And Gate 2 was sort of like the back entrance, or it's like the tradesman's entrance to the terminal building.
But it was the Aurigny departure gate, wasn't it?
Yeah, because it just separated us from everybody else. Not that we didn't want to be mixed up with anybody else, but it just made a sensible move. But it was an interesting little corridor. You had the gents' loos one side and the phone kiosks the other side. And then you used to just walk out the old double doors there and you were down the alleyway and just walked out onto the apron via air traffic. And we always used to be parked in front of the tower there. That was our sort of spot, if you like.
Yeah.
But it was it was an interesting building without a doubt.
Parking was cheap.
Photograph of it. I've got an old picture of it. Yeah. Right. I won't move the camera now, but I could show it to you if you wanted.
Well, we took a bit of a while to get you set up, didn't we? After you came through the Maurice Wyatt green room. I've
got an aviation corner over here over my desk.
Well, there's a trilander going straight through your ear at the moment, I see.
Indeed.
And that's quite an interesting tale, because you reckon that was a sales aid, don't you, for Britten Norman?
I never knew where it came from. I've never seen one like it before. It could well have been something that Britten Norman produced as a one-off. It's very small. It's to scale. I would think it's 1:144, something like that. And yes, it was an elderly chap who had a summer place on Alderney, and him and his wife used to go across every year. And subsequently, many years later, obviously, he passed away. And it was his sons going back one day, and they said they'd been going through their dad's bits and pieces and came across this little model of the Trilander, which is absolutely, it's right to scale, it's beautiful. And they said, we just thought perhaps you would like it. So I said, yeah, that'd be lovely.
Nice to have.
But
Absolutely.
I think perhaps he had some connection. He lived on the Isle of Wight, so he may well have had some connection with Britain Norman or knew
Yeah.
somebody there.
Yeah. Coming back to Southampton Airport, if you went over to Alderney, say for a fortnight,
Yeah.
parking was cheap and the dust was plentiful. You come back and find your car was absolutely covered in dust.
Yeah. I was trying to remember where all the car parks were in the early days. I mean,
there was one off to the right, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, you could actually, if you got a slot next to the terminal building round the back, you could park there. But yes, there was sort of, I was trying to remember, it was a fenced off, as you say, sort of dirt area.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was either muddy or it was dusty, depending on the time of the year.
But it was only £1 a day.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and you used to have to pay the old chap at the kiosk when you went out. Yeah, you used to have lots. I can't remember his name now, but you know, people used to argue with him over the fact that they hadn't been there 2 whole days or something like that. He'd be sat there and he'd go, "Sorry," he said, "rules are rules."
Absolutely. Yeah, that's true.
Yes, you say it was cheap. But
and of course,
not much was provided there.
No, very basic.
Everything was basic then.
Well, that's right. There was no duty free, was there?
No.
Anything like that.
About, I don't know when that was. Well, probably middle 80s, early 80s. They started. Yeah. They built a little wooden departure lounge on the back, or on the front of what were the old customs and excise buildings. And they built a wooden structure, which was always referred to as Uncle Tom's cabin. And in the summer, people used to pass out in the heat because it was so airless. And in the winter, they'd just freeze.
Happy days. Now, of course, Alderney week, obviously, from your point of view, was the big time of the year in terms of all of those flights.
A nightmare.
And invariably, it would be foggy on the Saturday, wouldn't it, over here?
Invariably. I don't know how it used to do it, Tony, really, but it did. I suppose you noticed it more at the weekends anyway, because obviously they were busy days. But July could be an absolutely awful month for fog. And I don't think anything changes. It's still the same. Climate change hasn't affected that too much. But you used to get some monumental delays sometimes. My first recollection actually was only the second year that I'd been there in 1972, and I think we hadn't managed to get a flight to Aurigny on the Thursday afternoon, Friday, or Saturday leading up to Aurigny week. And on Saturday night, we had to ship a whole 2 or 3 coach loads of people down to Weymouth to put them on the ferry to Guernsey. Mm-hmm. So it was as bad as that. And then we flew on the Sunday. And then 25 years later, funny enough, we had another really monumental one when we had to send people down to Poole to come across on Condor. And Condor stopped off at Alderney with them. But we used to regularly on an Alderney week do 14 or 15 flights on a Saturday. We had plenty of aircraft though, Tony. I think back in the 80s and 90s, we had about 10 Trilanders and plenty of crew. And, you know, even if we were delayed, we could catch up the next day or whatever. Yeah. But I think the busiest day we ever did was in that big one in 1997. And over the Aurigny weekend, and we had one night stopped aircraft at Southampton after 3 days of not flying, and we threw everything at it on the Sunday. We had all the staff in. We had staff from Alderney came up, and we did 29 departures out of Southampton that day.
Wow! Yeah,
there was 4 guys outside doing the meet, greet, unload, and turn round and everything. There were 3 of us inside, 2 on running the check-ins, and I was sort of doing load control and running here, there, and everywhere. But that sort of number could never be repeated again.
No, quite no, but interesting time. But fog was an issue. I mean, we got stuck there, I think, for 3 days on one occasion. And you were very good. You came out with regular reports.
Well, I mean, even if you had nothing to say, I mean, at least
just you were there.
yeah, yeah. I always feel very sorry when I see on the news about airline people who get stuck when, there's some disaster or something, or all the check-in systems fail, or something goes really wrong, and they're all milling around, and they're all saying, "Well, nobody's telling us anything,
Yeah.
what's going on." And I thought, poor guys, they probably don't know what's going on either, But you just got to go out there and have a chat.
You were a great communicator. There's no doubt about that. Tell us about strange cargoes, because of course these days with the Dorniers, it's basically a passenger operation. But with the Trilanders, you've got a few strange things to carry, yeah?
Oh, we used to do all sorts of things, Tony. I mean, we initially we'd carry all sorts of stuff. Later years, we were a bit more selective on what we would carry. But yeah, we used to do anything from obviously fruit and veg, the building supplies. A lot of people were building their own homes in Aurigny. So, if anybody had a staff connection, they were getting bags of cement sent over and all sorts of stuff. And I was trying to think I suppose the most awkward thing we ever did was somebody wanted to send a piano over, an upright piano. And for some reason we said, yeah, but if you can come over and sort of make it more manageable, well, there's not a lot you can do except take the keyboard off.
Cut it in half.
Yeah. So we had this upright piano, and it just went in, if you took out rows 3 and 4 by the front, the second door towards the front, and it just went in there, and we had to take all the other seats out and push the piano up to the back of the aircraft and tie it in and all the rest of it, put all the seats back in. And then the blessed aircraft had to divert to Guernsey because of the weather. And Guernsey sat on this aircraft as long as they could, hoping that there was no way they were going to have to take the thing off. And of course, eventually they had to, because we had to use the aircraft for something else. That we never did. We never repeated that one again.
Right, excluding pianos.
Yeah.
What about awkward passengers?
Oh, hundreds of them.
Every single one.
I mean, I always thought our passengers were a fabulous bunch, really. I mean, they were always understanding. Nobody blamed, if the weather was out, there's not much you could do about it.
That's right.
And, yeah, we've had, I say, going back to carrying funny things, it's like one passenger bought her macaw parrot back in the 80s when we were in Twin Otter days at that point.
Right, yeah.
I suppose I can name her. It was Wyn Andrews. You remember her?
Oh, dear old Wyn. Yes.
And her beautiful macaw, Winston. And she turned up with Winston to take him back to Aurigny with her. And she didn't have a proper cage for it. She bought a tea chest with her and a bit of garden pea netting to put over the top of it, which was never going to do anything. And also his big stand to perch on. But she was there hours before the flight. So she said, "Can I leave him on the perch by your check-in?" So I said, "Yeah, that's okay. It'll be a talking point." And which it was. And then, of course, it came to the time when we had to put this macaw into the tea chest. So we managed to get a couple of heavy-duty blankets. And she said, "You can put him in the tea chest." And I said, no, you can put him in the tea chest. I said, "I'm not touching it." She said, "Oh, he's a friendly bird." So anyway, she manages to put him in the tea chest. And we throw the blanket over the top and roped it round and everything else. There was no way he could get out. You could see his head pushing up against the blanket like that. It was a real Monty Python thing. But she came back and her arms streaming blood where he'd drawn blood on her. And it was, anyway, we did that, and she got Winston to Aurigny, where he lived for many happy years.
He did indeed. It all changed a bit, I think, when they built the new terminal building. In terms of, it went from a fairly informal situation to better watch the rules, chaps, and all this sort of thing.
I think probably yes. I mean, that was in 1994 when we actually moved into the current new terminal building. And it was a totally different operation altogether, because our office was in the middle of the building behind the check-ins. You had no view of the apron. You couldn't see what was going on outside. Whereas before, we'd been used to hopping in and out quite freely and being able to see exactly what was on the apron. And also, security had started to pick up an awful lot. I mean, there'd been the dreadful thing of Lockerbie, that had an impact. And then also, of course, when we got to 9/11, that side of things changed completely, and aviation changed radically. Compared to what it was before.
Yeah, very much so. Now, how long ago is it since you retired? It's a few years now, is it?
I actually officially retired 2015 in the October. So 5.5 years.
Yeah. And I think you're one of the few people that got formal recognition from the States of Alderney.
I have, yes.
An illuminated address.
Yes, not quite. Well, you were party to that as well, because it was all kept a big secret when I was down there one day, and you dragged me around to the States office, and I wondered what
on a pretense.
Yeah, and that's in my corner, my aviation corner. It's on the wall,
right?
And signed by all the States members, and I felt quite privileged for that.
Well, I think actually, I think you're one of the few people that have received anything like that. So it's a collector's item. Could see it on Bargain Hunt. Just to close,
with the provenance attached, of course.
Absolutely. just to close off, Southampton Airport at the moment's obviously in a difficult situation. I think Eastleigh Borough Council are going to have another look at it in a few weeks' time, but it is worrying, isn't it?
It is. The actual decision date now, I saw yesterday, is going to be the 25th of this month. They're going to make a decision. I sincerely hope that they give it to them, because I think the airport is so vital to the area. You've got obviously the conflicting interest parties who don't want it, but as an asset to the city and the area, it's immense, and it's only 160 meters more runway length within the airport boundary, and it just means that aircraft which do use the airport now, the A320, 737s, they do use the airport from time to time, but obviously if they wanted to use it on a scheduled basis, a slightly longer runway would give them a more sensible payload that they could work on. I mean,
and that could mean less flights.
Sorry?
That could mean effectively less flights, couldn't it? If people are worried about the number of flights.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been the case that, it's never going to be a Gatwick or anything like that. Yeah. But it's important that the local area have that opportunity and that facility. There are routes that are going to come back, hopefully COVID permitting, coming back in, I think, the end of May. British Airways internal division. I don't know if they're called British Airways Express now, but that side of it, going to start doing some weekend flights to about 7 or 8 destinations in sort of France and close by, using the Embraer 195, same as Aurigny.
Yeah.
That can use the airport perfectly okay as it is. And I think Eastern Airways are going to start up a flight to Gibraltar, which is interesting. And of course, hopefully, Aurigny will be back doing a direct Southampton-Alderney. I was looking today, I think in the booking system, the first day that there's flights showing now is the 12th of April, but that date moves around, I think. But they were, as far as I know, looking to do a couple of direct Southamptons each day.
We've booked up a couple of flights, one late May, one late June, as direct flights now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
got rid of some of my frequent flyer points. Anyway, to round up, it's been great to see you.
Thank you, Tony.
We hope you'll actually make a live appearance down in Aurigny once we can.
Yeah, I've had a couple of setbacks because I was supposed to try and get down for a 2 or 3 day visit back in 2019.
Yeah.
And I'd was suffering with an arthritic knee, and I was in agony, and I had to cancel it. And I had a new knee replacement in the July that year, which actually was very good. So up and running again. So I was all planned to come down last year for a couple of days, and of course then it was a pandemic. So I'm hoping maybe, who knows, towards the end of this year there might be an opportunity if things are opened up and we've all been jabbed, and we'll all carry our vaccination passport.
Certificates. Yeah.
Anyway, I hope it all does start to lift off though, because things really need to try and get back to a bit of normality.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime, all we've got to do is stay safe.
Absolutely. That's the thing, isn't it? Keep safe. Thanks so much. It's been great to see you again. You know, we correspond from time to time, don't we? But it's nice to actually see you on Zoom.
It's a great facility, isn't it?
It certainly is. So love to Kath. Take care.
And same to Christine.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, see you later in the year, mate. We've got to be positive.
Yes, indeed. Thanks a lot, Tony. Nice to talk to you.
Thanks, Maurice. Bye.